What up? T-Bob here.
And Jake as well.
And look at you. You done stumbled upon little OTB Saints, where we bring you all the latest black and gold coverage.
Who are the Saints going to draft? Who's going to be their quarterback? What does the salary cap look like? All that information and more.
Hope you enjoy it. Like, subscribe.
Let's dive right into it. The NFL draft is coming up, rapidly approaching. Obviously, everyone's focused on the offensive line. Everyone thinks that it's pretty much a given that they go offensive line in round one. But outside of offensive line, where would you like to see the Saints go in this draft?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think if they had it their way, and I think if I was running the team and they had good offensive tackles and you weren't kind of backed into a corner there, I mean, I think there's two places where you'd like it to go. I mean, one of them, obviously, I think it's still the pass rush. I think they can use more people there, and that would definitely be, something that could help. But I think all things being equal, like the guy that I really, really like is Brock Bowers. And you just look at, the stuff that Kyle Shanahan was able to do in San Francisco. And I think a major key to that was having a versatile fullback and a versatile tight end. And that just kind of opens up all the things you can do in disguise. And you can't really cheat on personnel at that point. If your fullback can split out wide, you can play inline tight end, you can play fullback. If your tight end can block and catch passes and go outside, it just kind of opens up what you can do formationally with your personnel. And that element of disguise, I think, allows them, you go through, you start looking at their plays, like you see the same concept get run out of 6, 7, 8 different looks, and then you throw the motions on top of it, and it becomes extremely complex for the defense. But for the guys executing it, it's really simple. And there's just kind of a handful of core philosophies with a lot of window dressing on it. And I think if you have those type of players, it kind of just opens things up a little bit. And they got the fullback from the Chargers, who can do a lot of stuff in pass catching and a lot of different things. And I think he's going to be a real competition to Adam Prentice. And I think, honestly, looking at kind of just his traits, and he doesn't have a ton of NFL experience, but looking at his traits and just kind of how he might fit into this, I think he might have the upper hand on that going into camp. I mean, there's really no backlog of experience with anyone. It's kind of just clean slate going forward. And their running backs coach came from there too. So I kind of feel like he was handpicked for this a little bit. And if they could get that type of tight end to kind of add into the mix with Foster Moreau and Juwan Johnson, I think it just kind of opens everything up. So it's unfortunate that they're in this spot. And I think that they kind of had cleared the deck a little bit. They bring in Chase Young, it kind of addresses the pass rush. And then the Ramczyk injury just kind of derailed everything. So now I think they're kind of backed into that corner a little bit. But I would be absolutely shocked if they haven't kind of had, some of those conversations with guys where they're going to sign a veteran maybe after the draft. They did it with Tyrann Mathieu, Jarvis Landry, Jameis Winston. And the reason for doing that is that if you sign them after the draft, it doesn't count against the comp pick formula. So they can play a ton and it doesn't offset, one of the guys that you lost in free agency. So you don't end up losing a pick for adding talent. So by waiting, you can do that. And I think someone like Mekhi Becton would make a lot of sense. He was a former first-round pick, had some injuries, and he issues with his weight, I think. But if he's he's still available, we haven't heard anything on him. I wouldn't be surprised if they've talked to him. I wouldn't be surprised if Avonte Maddox, who visited the Saints very early on, and then there's been not a peep about him since. I wouldn't be surprised if he comes after the draft too. So I think there's still some stuff we haven't maybe seen that they're working on. But yeah, I mean, they're definitely backed into a corner a little bit at tackle.
Well, you were talking about Brock Bowers. If that's a guy that fell to you at 14, look, if they absolutely fall in love with someone and they don't think they're going to be there at 14, could you see Mickey Loomis trading up?
Oh, that's always definitely a possibility. And I think that's one of the things that you kind of, I like that they like people so much that they're willing to go after them. Like, you want to be that convicted in your scouting process and all that. The problem is that it hasn't always necessarily worked great, especially recently. So, it just kind of feels like they're at a place where I almost want them to be just a little bit more, just, they don't have to trade back. Just don't trade up. Like, don't give up a future first round pick to go up unless it's for a quarterback. Like, that's the only way that I would kind of be on board with it. But it just feels like they're at a place where they're trying to reset and kind of calm down this whole process a little bit. Like, everything has just been a little bit too aggressive. I understand why they kept their foot on the gas. I was kind of saying they should do it because it felt like they had the roster to kind of go and still make the playoffs. And, in all honesty, they were a game away last year. You can pick 25 different moments that if this had happened, they would have won that game. They would have gone to the playoffs. But they aren't a contender right now. They aren't a Super Bowl contender right now. So I would like it for them to just kind of just back off the gas a little bit and just kind of just be measured in the approach and just save those picks. Like, have your first round pick next year. Don't go into a draft next year where, and they're trying to I don't know if rebuild's the right word, but they're rebuilding a little bit, and that's tough to do when it's first round pick, second round pick, nothing until the fifth. Like, keep those assets in there, hang on to them, just go into it with what you have, work with what you got, reset the cap, get into a place where you then can go, all in again. And I think I think this year's kind of backed off a little bit. I think next year has to be backed off a little bit. And then the year after that, I think you're in a position to kind of go for it. And, it's going to be interesting to see where they're at by that point. It might be a full on reset by them, but like, I think it's kind of needed at this point, just to have that sober thought in the room of, all right, like, this was a 9-win team, probably not going to win the Super Bowl. Probably doesn't make a lot of sense to trade up for, a left tackle and then he doesn't play. Like, those are the moves that have kind of set them back a little bit. And I think that they just can't risk that. And I don't think it's even at a place where you can justify the aggression.
Nick, we were talking about Brock Bowers just a second ago, and we're talking about now trading up the pick and everything. So whether it's him in the first round or a lot of tight ends like a Jaheim Bell has been mocked to him from a lot of different experts as far as the later rounds. If they go tight end, you brought up a good point earlier about how they like to use their fullbacks. Kyle Juszczyk with the San Francisco 49ers, the way they use him, it's unlike anything else in the league. If they do draft a tight end in this draft, could you see possibly Taysom Hill moving into a role like that?
Yeah, it's something that I think could make a decent amount of sense. And it's something that I know that they've talked about and they've explored, just kind of, how does he fit into this? I don't think he fits into it perfectly. Like, I don't think he's someone that you want, blocking, leading the charge out of the backfield, like, 20 times a game or anything like that, or whatever it is. But he's someone that I think can do more, and you can get more creative with all that stuff for sure. And he definitely has that blocking ability. And, for it to open up a little bit more, like, all you have to do is make that stuff just be a little bit believable. And it's, kind of the idea behind him throwing the ball. Like, I know people get frustrated with that all the time. Like, why are you bringing him out there to throw a pass? You got Drew Brees out there, but like, you have to do it every now and then to kind of keep that honesty within the defense. And once those safeties start cheating up too much, like, you have to show them that you're willing to throw the ball and you're willing to throw it deep. And, whether the play works or not, it doesn't really matter. It's about the next 15 times you line up in that look, and now that thought's in their head, and you don't have this tendency or just an unwillingness to take advantage of it. So I think those same principles could kind of apply to the fullback stuff. Like, if you bring him out there and you have him as the lead blocker, 2-3 times a game, every single time he comes out, like, now you have to think, okay, there's a possibility this might happen, and it changes how you defend it. And you kind of, maybe line them up there and then formation out. So now you have a mismatch that you can exploit in the passing game or something. So I think it just has to tell a little bit of a story, and the story just can't be a complete fable. Like, there has to be some element of, like, it doesn't have to be a documentary, but it has to be based on a true story. And if you just can do that and tell it to the defense, like, it does open it up. So I think we're going to see a little bit more creativity with him for sure. I mean, I think the handful of core principles that they have with them, like, if I'm Clint Kubiak, like, I'm pulling power and, a lot of the stuff they did and dropping it into what I do and finding a way to make it look a little bit more just creative. But I think those core principles stay. But if you just add some of that little bit of dressing on there, I think it makes everything you're doing with them a little bit more effective. So I definitely think that we see some of that next year.
Well, Nick, sticking with the offensive side of the ball as far as in the draft, look, you have Chris Olave, you have Rashid Shaheed, so you got your 1 and 2. You have 2 solid receivers. Outside of them, there's a lot of question marks. I mean, you got guys on the roster, but you haven't seen a ton from them yet. Are there any wide receiver targets you'd look at in the draft?
Yeah, depending on the value. Like, I think Keon Coleman could make a lot of sense, or Keon Coleman type. I don't know if I'd do it at 14, but I think if there's value there at a certain point, I think that's something that could make a lot of sense. Just bigger body guy can go up and get it. I mean, I know the 4.6 is a little bit off-putting to people, but you look at his street cone, like, there's a lot of agility there. I would remind people that Mike Thomas ran, I think, a 4.57, and that worked out pretty well for a lot of years. So, I think he's the body type and the type of player that just kind of fits. Like, they don't have that big body guy, the contested catch guy, and I think he blends in with them kind of really well. I think look, if Brian Thomas was there, like, I like Brian Thomas a lot, like, in the second round. If that's a possibility, that's something that I would be really excited about if I was running the team, just bringing him in. I think there's a lot of talent there. And, I think he's a little bit, there's some similarities, but I think he does some stuff a little bit more physical than the guys they have. So I think it could work with that too. yeah, there's, ideally though, it's a bigger body physical catch type guy because you have all the speed and agility with the other two that, I don't think that's something that you need to go after. And I think A.T. Perry has a chance to make some of those contested catches too, but like just that easy type of target, like, and it doesn't have to be a receiver. Like it could be like, if the conversation's Brock Bowers or a wide receiver, another tight end and the wide receiver, like it could be the tight end and you can line them up different ways and get those same looks. So it doesn't have to be a receiver, but I think there's an absolute need for that. And then the other quality that I'd be looking at is yards after catch. Like almost like it was detrimental last year, and it has been since they changed the offense, going into 17. Like, so this isn't a Derek Carr problem. Like it's the Saints offense problem. And, I think some of their players play into it too. It's just the yards after catch. Like almost all their yards on 17 have really had to come through the air. And it's not how the game is played anymore. Like there's so much yards after catch stuff. Like, then that's going to help. I think the offense is going to help with that. It's going to get them open in space. I think Olave kind of has to change up a little bit, which is, he doesn't fight for yards a lot. I think if you get him maybe trying to break a tackle, that helps a little bit. And, I think just drafting someone that has that ability, it's a mindset. Like it's just kind of something that you have, I kind of think you don't. And, I think they need to get that element in their offense really, really, I think it's imperative almost that they find someone and find different ways to open that up for their quarterback.
So are they going to look for like a bigger bodied guy in the draft? Because that's kind of what we've been talking about, right? Whether it's a Keon Coleman, you mentioned Brian Thomas, he's a bigger guy because you got Olave, and I mean, he's not a huge body, and then Shaheed's kind of your speedster. They're looking for like that bigger bodied type guy, I would think, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's like kind of like if you have like Stephon Diggs, you need someone that can play off him. You just need that other element because sometimes everyone's going to be covered and you got to be able to throw the ball somewhere, and bigger body guy can, he can go up and get it. He can use his catch radius to be open kind of when he's not, kind of those throws where it's like, oh, all right, put it on the outside shoulder while the guy's covering the backside shoulder. Like Olave and Shaheed just aren't the type of guys that are going to do that consistently. Like, so it's just, you need someone that can make those hard plays. And I think it's something that they want for sure in their offense. I think it's a high priority. Going back to what we were saying in the first question, like if they weren't backed into this corner with the tackle, like I think it's almost priority one at this point because like you can check that box at pass rusher with Chase Young. Like there's at least an if and a maybe there, and that physical, like it's as barren as offensive tackle, but offensive tackle's imperative. Like you can't not have someone there. So all things being equal, like it is the big body pass catcher, and for me, kind of looking at the names that are there, like. I go to Bowers, but like it doesn't have to be that. Like you just have to get somebody that can be it, and it can be a tight end or a wide receiver, but they have to have it. And I think they know that, and I think it's a top priority. I think it's a borderline must for them. It's just the problem is the lack of assets. Like you can't address all of them. I think like you aren't leaving the draft with 2 starting tackles, a starting pass rusher, and this type of receiver when you only got 2 picks in the first 4 rounds. So. There might be something that they need to do to acquire more picks. Like it's just there's a lot of holes that they got to figure out how to fill, and it is something that I think they definitely need to do though.
Nick Underhill of neworleans.football joining us right now. Nick, the news that kind of everyone was discussing yesterday, the Saints signed Northern Ireland goalkeeper Charlie Smith to come on the roster as a kicker to compete with Blake Groovy for that spot. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's worth a shot. Like you see the videos, like there's a 63-yarder with a crosswind. Like he hit it. I think at the combine he was like under 75% or something like that. Like he had a tryout and he's under 75%. So I think there's definitely some work that he needs to do. But he's new to the craft. Darren Rizzi is a great coach, special teams coach. I mean he was the guy that pioneered the new kickoff role. Like he's just held in that esteem. Among his colleagues and around the league, like he wasn't like put into that position. He was kind of appointed it by his peers. So they kind of look at him as that guy. And then like you saw, just with the punter last year, like he got coached up into a place where when he first showed up, it looked like he had no chance. And then he ends up winning the job. And, I don't necessarily love how they handled punts last year, but it worked. Like the net on it was really good. So, if they think they can work with this guy and there's crazy upside, like I think it's worth finding out. And then, if it doesn't hit, who cares? Like he signed a 3-year contract, not a single dollar guaranteed. He comes in, tries out, and he wins the job or he doesn't. And, that's fine. But I like it. I like that they're always aggressive at those spots. Like Rizzi kind of runs that program like really competitively on that side of the ball. Like there's nobody's sacred. He's always bringing in guys. When he had Deontay Hardy, like he found Rashid Shaheed in the scouting process, and at that point Hardy's like a Pro Bowler, All Pro, and they were already looking a year ahead and trying to find a way to add competition and potentially replace him. So I think if this guy comes in and does great, like Groupie's, I don't think he's guaranteed anything by any stretch of the imagination. I just hope they find another punter to bring in and have, a competition there and make sure that what they were doing last year was the best way to do it. So, I like it. There's no risk. And, a guy that can hit a 63-yarder that's been kicking for like a couple of years, like I think that's kind of intriguing.
Nick, just one more question for you before I get you out of here. So, Jake Haener, he's a guy that they drafted, spent a 4th-round pick on a year ago. Then you bring in Nathan Peterman. Those two are kind of battling out for that backup QB role. Is there a chance that the Saints bring in another veteran to kind of compete with those two guys, or do they feel comfortable with their QB room?
I think it's have to bring in another vet. Like I think it's kind of an indictment on Haener at that point. Like 4th-round pick, and they traded up to get him. So I mean, he needs to kind of lock that down. That was kind of what he was brought here to do, was to be the backup quarterback. And if he can't be that, look, I don't think Peterman's really here like to be the backup quarterback. I think he's kind of here as like an asset in the quarterback room. And I could be completely wrong, but just looking at Nathan Peterman's resume, like it kind of feels like he's not there to hold it down if chaos ensues. Like he worked with Janoko with the Bears. Like I think they just liked what he brought to that room, and they're like, all right, like let's get him in this room. He can help teach the program. He can help Derek, like all this stuff. But I think it's beyond just like being the backup. I think Haener needs to be that guy, and then if they bring someone else in, I think it spells trouble for that pick, and it's kind of an admission that it hasn't worked out yet. And look, I would hope they aren't at that point yet. I thought he was like pretty underwhelming in the preseason, but I thought we saw some stuff in camp that looked pretty solid. So if he continues that, maybe he's made some growth over the last year. Maybe he can be that guy, but. Push comes to shove, though. Like, I don't think this is a team that should even really spend money on that position, because I don't think they're good enough to try to be worrying about preserving their season if their starter goes down. Like, if the starter goes down and you bring in a $10 million backup and it's Jameis Winston the equivalent, like, I don't think that it's keeping things afloat. Like, I think when you make that investment, like, you're a team that's kind of looking to win 10, 11 games. Like, I think the Saints are a team that knows they're probably like a 9-win team, and then there's like a little bit of variance on both sides of that. But if you take Carr out of that equation and you throw in, Ryan Tannehill, like, I don't think you're getting to 9 wins, no matter what. So I don't think it's worth the investment. I think they kind of just got to roll with what they got. And if like Haener's a disaster, like go out and find another league minimum type player. Like there's got to be a McCown somewhere, not doing anything, a guy like that. That would kind of be what I'm looking at. But I wouldn't be looking at like one of these like high upside backup quarterbacks, because I don't think the team is there. And I think they're better off just saving that $10 million for, a year from now to invest in a pass rusher or cleaning up the cap. So paying for right now just doesn't make a lot of sense.
Wow, just amazing black and gold takes right there, Jake.
I don't think I've ever heard any takes that are better than the two guys that just gave you that take.
And you can keep getting them by going ahead and liking, subscribing, ringing the bell to get notifications when we post. Have a great day. We'll see you on the next OTB Saints.